The snow fell like forgotten prayers that December night, and when Frank Reid found the shivering girl curled beneath the park bench, her lips blue and eyes hollow with secrets, he had no idea that saving her life would mean confronting the ghost of the family he'd lost, and discovering that sometimes, the people we rescue are the ones who save us. Frank Reid's hands trembled as he gripped the steering wheel, though it had nothing to do with the cold. It was December 19th, 3 years to the day since the accident. 3 years since Sarah's laugh had filled their home. 3 years since their daughter Emma's room had been anything but a shrine to silence. He'd taken the long route home from the office again, anything to delay walking through that front door into the echo chamber of his grief. The Minneapolis winter had turned vicious early this year, the kind of cold that cut through even the best intentions. His breath fogged the windshield as he stopped at the red light on Hennepin Avenue, the Christmas decorations mocking him with their cheerful glow. "What would you think of me now, Sarah?" he thought, rubbing his wedding ring, still there after all this time, still anchoring him to a life that no longer existed. Working 16-hour days, microwaving dinners for one, forgetting what your voice sounded like. The light turned green, but Frank didn't move. Through the snow-smeared window, something caught his eye in Loring Park across the street. A heap of dark fabric beneath one of the benches. Probably just trash, he told himself. The city was full of it. But then the heap moved. His father's voice echoed in his head, gruff and certain. "You see someone in trouble, Frank, you don't look away. You don't get to choose when compassion is convenient." Frank pulled over, leaving the engine running. The snow crunched under his Oxfords, ridiculous shoes for this weather, but he'd stopped caring about details like that. As he approached the bench, his heart began hammering against his ribs. It was a child. A girl, maybe 9 or 10 years old, curled into herself like a comma in a sentence that had forgotten its ending. Her coat, if you could call it that, was thin as tissue paper, torn at the seams. No hat, no gloves. Her dark hair was matted with snow and ice, her small frame shaking so violently it seemed impossible that she was still conscious. "Jesus," Frank breathed, dropping to his knees beside her. The snow soaked through his pants immediately, but he didn't notice. Hey, sweetheart, can you hear me?" The girl's eyes fluttered open, dark brown, almost black, and filled with a terror so profound it knocked the air from Frank's lungs. She tried to scramble backward, but her movements were sluggish, hypothermic. No, I'm not going to hurt you," Frank said, raising his hands, keeping his voice soft despite the panic clawing at his throat. "My name is Frank. You're freezing. We need to get you warm, okay? Can you tell me your name?" The girl's lips moved, but no sound came out. Her teeth were chattering so hard Frank worried she might bite through her tongue. He didn't think. There wasn't time for thinking. Frank shrugged off his wool overcoat and wrapped it around her tiny frame. She was so small, so impossibly small, and lifted her into his arms. She weighed nothing. Less than nothing. How long had she been out here? How long had she been hungry? "I've got you," he whispered, carrying her toward his car. "I've got you now." The girl didn't fight him. She couldn't. But as Frank settled her into the passenger seat and cranked the heat to maximum, those dark eyes watched him with something that wasn't quite trust, but wasn't quite fear either. Something in between. Something that looked like a question she'd been asking for far too long without an answer. Frank grabbed his phone, his fingers hovering over 911. Protocol said call the police, let the system handle it. But he'd seen enough news stories, heard enough horror stories from his colleague David, who volunteered at youth services. Foster care was a lottery, and most kids lost. Social services was understaffed and overwhelmed. And this girl, this half-frozen, terrified girl, didn't have time for bureaucracy. "What are you doing, Frank?" The rational part of his brain was screaming at him. "You can't just take a child home. There are laws. Procedures." But then he looked at her again, really looked. At the bruises on her wrists, faded yellow and green, but unmistakable. At the way she'd positioned herself against the door, ready to bolt despite barely being able to move. At the careful blankness in her expression, the look of a child who'd learned that showing emotion was dangerous. Frank had seen that look before. In the mirror, in those first months after Sarah and Emma died, when simply existing required more courage than he possessed. "Okay," he said quietly, more to himself than to her. "Okay, we're going to figure this out. But first, we need to get you warm and fed. Is that all right?" The girl didn't respond, But she didn't try to run either. Frank took that as permission. The drive to his house in Edina took 20 minutes through the snow-clogged streets. Frank kept glancing over, half expecting her to vanish like a ghost. She stayed pressed against the door, her small hands tucked into the folds of his coat, those watchful eyes tracking every movement he made. "I live alone," Frank said, surprising himself by talking. He never talked anymore. "Big house. Too big, really, for just me. It's quiet. Safe. I'm not." He paused, searching for words. "I'm not going to hurt you. I know you don't know me. I know you have no reason to trust me. But I promise you're safe. Just for tonight. We'll figure out the rest tomorrow." When they pulled into his driveway, the girl finally spoke. Her voice was barely a whisper, raspy and broken. "You're lying." Frank's hand froze on the key in the ignition. "What?" "Everyone lies." The girl's eyes were fixed straight ahead, not looking at him. "You'll call them. You'll send me back. They all do." The certainty in her voice, the bone-deep resignation, made something crack open in Frank's chest. He thought of Emma, who'd believed in magic and happy endings right up until the end. This girl had learned the opposite lesson. She'd learned that happy endings were for other people. "Who would I send you back to?" Frank asked gently. The girl's jaw clenched. For a moment, Frank thought she wouldn't answer. Then, "Doesn't matter. They always find you." They. Not him. Not her. They. Multiple people. Multiple threats. Frank made a decision. Maybe it was the right one. Maybe it would destroy both their lives. But sitting in that driveway, looking at this broken child who'd given up on rescue, he knew he couldn't make any other choice. "What if I don't call anyone?" he said. "What if you stay here, just for tonight, and we figure out the rest together? No police. No social workers. Not yet. Not until you're ready." The girl's head turned slowly. She studied him with those ancient eyes, searching for the lie, the trap, the inevitable betrayal. Frank held her gaze, letting her see whatever she needed to see. Finally, she gave the smallest nod. Frank let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. "Okay," he said. "Okay, let's get you inside. What would you do if you found someone who needed saving, but saving them meant risking everything you'd built to protect yourself? Drop your thoughts below." The house swallowed them in warmth and silence. Frank flipped on lights as they entered, suddenly seeing his home through a stranger's eyes. The expensive furniture that no one sat on, the framed photos he'd turned face down on the mantel 2 years ago, the kitchen that gleamed from disuse. A mausoleum for the living. The girl stood in the entryway, still wrapped in his overcoat, dripping melted snow onto the hardwood. She didn't move further inside, as if crossing the threshold required permission she didn't believe she had. "Bathrooms this way," Frank said, gesturing down the hall. "You need to warm up slowly. A hot shower could shock your system. We'll start with lukewarm water, okay?" She followed him at a distance, maintaining exactly 6 feet between them. Frank noticed the way she cataloged every exit, every window, every potential weapon. This wasn't a child lost in the woods. This was a soldier in enemy territory. He showed her the bathroom, pulling out towels that still smelled like Sarah's lavender detergent. He'd never been able to bring himself to switch brands. "Take as long as you need. I'll find you some clean clothes. They'll be too big, but they'll be warm." The girl stared at the bathtub, then at him, suspicion carved into every line of her small face. "I'll be in the kitchen," Frank added, backing toward the door. "The lock works from the inside. Use it. I won't come in unless you call for me." He closed the door and stood in the hallway, listening to the silent stretch. Then, finally, the soft click of the lock engaging, the sound of running water, and underneath it, so quiet he almost missed it, the sound of a child crying. Frank pressed his forehead against the wall and closed his eyes. What am I doing? What the hell am I doing? But he knew. He was doing what no one had done for him when Sarah and Emma died. He was showing up. He was staying. In the kitchen, Frank ransacked the refrigerator. When was the last time he'd actually cooked? Most nights he survived on protein bars and black coffee. But somewhere in the back, he found eggs, cheese, bread. He could make an omelet. Something warm, something gentle on a stomach that had probably been empty for too long. He was whisking eggs when his phone buzzed. David Chun, his colleague and closest thing to a friend these days. "Beer at O'Malley's? You need to stop hibernating, man." Frank stared at the message. "How did you explain that you just brought home a frozen child from the park? That you were committing what was probably a dozen felonies? That for the first time in 3 years, You felt something other than the dull ache of existence? Can't tonight. Rain check. He set the phone face down and focused on cooking. The omelet turned out better than expected, fluffy, golden, filled with cheese. He added toast, a glass of orange juice, arranged it all on one of Sarah's nice plates. Then he stood there, staring at the meal, and felt the tears come. Sarah had always set a beautiful table. Even on random Tuesdays, even for macaroni and cheese, she'd made meals feel like celebrations. Food is love made visible, she used to say, usually while dancing around the kitchen with Emma on her hip. The bathroom door opened. Frank wiped his eyes quickly and turned. The girl had changed into the clothes he'd left outside the bathroom door. A pair of his old sweatpants, rolled up at least 6 times, and a University of Minnesota t-shirt that hung on her like a dress. Her hair was still wet, combed straight back from her face, revealing features that were both delicate and sharp. Without the grime and ice, he could see she was probably around 9 years old, maybe 10. With proper care, proper feeding, she might have been any suburban kid heading to soccer practice. But there was nothing ordinary about the way she held herself. Nothing childlike about the wariness in her eyes. I made you some food, Frank said, gesturing to the plate on the kitchen island. Nothing fancy, but it's warm. The girl approached slowly, her bare feet silent on the tile. She stared at the omelet like it might be a trap. It's not poisoned, Frank said with a small smile. I ate from the same carton of eggs this morning. Why? The word came out flat, accusatory. Why what? Why are you doing this? She looked up at him, and the nakedness of the question hit him like a physical blow. What do you want? Frank pulled out a stool across from her, keeping the island between them. He needed her to feel safe. He needed her to understand that he wasn't. Wasn't what? A predator? How does she know that? How could she possibly know that? I lost my family, he said quietly, surprising himself with the truth. 3 years ago. Car accident. My wife Sarah and my daughter Emma. She was 7. He paused, his throat tight. I know what it's like to be alone. I know what it's like when the world stops making sense. And I couldn't, his voice cracked. I couldn't just drive past you. I couldn't leave you there. The girl's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Recognition, maybe. Or just the exhausted acceptance that everyone had a sob story. Eat, Frank said. Please. You don't have to trust me. You don't have to talk to me. But you need to eat. She picked up the fork like it was a foreign object. Then, finally, she took a bite. And another. And another. Within 3 minutes, the plate was empty, the food devoured with the desperation of someone who didn't know when their next meal might come. Frank got up and made another omelet without asking. She ate that one too, slightly slower but with the same single-minded focus. When she finished, she looked up at him, and for the first time, there was something other than suspicion in her face. Thank you, she whispered. You're welcome. Frank cleared the plates, giving her space. Do you want to tell me your name? Long silence. Then, Lily. Lily, Frank repeated, testing the weight of it. That's a beautiful name. How old are you, Lily? 9. Almost 10. And how long were you out there? In the park? Her jaw tightened. I don't know. A while. Where are your parents? The question landed like a bomb. Lily's whole body went rigid, her hands clenching into fists on the counter. When she looked up at him, there was pure terror in her eyes. I can't go back, she said, her voice rising. I can't. I won't. If you try to make me, I'll run again. I'll disappear. You'll never find me. Okay, Frank said quickly, raising his hands. Okay, Lily. No one's making you go anywhere. I just need to understand. He'll kill me. The words came out strangled, desperate. If I go back, he'll kill me this time. He said so. He promised. Frank felt the blood drain from his face. Who? Who said that? But Lily was shaking her head, backing away from the counter, the panic fully taking over. I shouldn't have told you. I shouldn't have said anything. You're going to call them. You're going to. Lily. Frank moved around the island slowly, carefully, like approaching a wounded animal. Lily, look at me. Look at me. She did, tears streaming down her face, her whole body trembling. I'm not calling anyone, Frank said firmly. Not tonight. Not tomorrow. Not until you and I figure this out together. Do you understand? You're safe here. Whatever you're running from, it's not getting through that door. I promise you. You can't promise that, Lily whispered. No one can. Frank crouched down to her eye level, maintaining distance but holding her gaze. You're right. I can't promise nothing bad will ever happen again. But I can promise that I will do everything in my power to protect you. And I can promise that for tonight, right now, you are safe. You are warm. You are fed. And you are not alone. Lily stared at him, searching his face for the lie. Frank let her look. He had nothing to hide. Nothing except his own grief, his own brokenness, and somehow that seemed to be enough. Okay, she finally breathed. Okay, Frank echoed. He stood up, his knees cracking. You must be exhausted. There's a guest room upstairs. Clean sheets, warm blankets, door locks from the inside. Or he hesitated. Or you can sleep down here on the couch if that feels safer. Whatever you need. The couch, Lily said immediately. The couch it is. Frank grabbed blankets from the linen closet and set up a makeshift bed in the living room. Lily watched him work, still maintaining that careful distance. When he finished, Frank stepped back. I'll be upstairs if you need anything. Anything at all. Just yell, okay? Lily nodded, already curling up under the blankets, her small body disappearing into the cushions. Frank turned to leave, then paused. Lily? I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you're safe. Mr. Reid. Her voice was so quiet, he almost missed it. Yeah. Why don't you have any pictures? Frank turned back. Lily was looking at the mantel, at the turned-down frames, at the empty spaces where a family used to be. I do have pictures, he said softly. I just couldn't look at them anymore. It hurt too much. Lily considered this. My mom used to say that love doesn't go away just because people do. She said it lives in your heart forever. Frank's breath caught. Your mom sounds like she was a smart woman. She was. Lily's eyes were already closing, exhaustion finally claiming her. She died when I was 5. After that, everything got bad. Before Frank could respond, her breathing evened out. She'd fallen asleep mid-conversation, her body finally surrendering to its desperate need for rest. Frank stood there for a long moment, watching this tiny stranger who'd crash-landed into his life, and felt something he hadn't felt in 3 years. Not happiness exactly, not peace, but something close to purpose. Something that felt like a reason to wake up tomorrow. He climbed the stairs to his bedroom, but sleep didn't come. Instead, he lay in the dark, listening to the house breathe around him, and thought about the bruises on Lily's wrists. About the terror in her voice when she said he'll kill me. About the careful way she'd cataloged exits and weapons. This wasn't a lost child. This was a hunted one. And Frank had just made himself part of her story. For better or worse, there was no going back now. Around 3 in the morning, a sound woke him. Soft crying from downstairs. Frank got up, moved to the landing, and peered down into the living room. Lily was sitting up on the couch, her knees pulled to her chest, sobbing into the blankets with the kind of grief that came from the depths of the soul. She was trying to be quiet about it, muffling the sounds, but the pain was too big to contain. Every instinct told Frank to go to her, to comfort her. But he held back. Sometimes people needed to break alone. Sometimes the only gift you could give was the safety to fall apart without an audience. So he sat on the top stair and listened to this child cry for everything she'd lost, everything she'd survived, everything she was still running from. And he cried too, silently, for Sarah and Emma and the life that had been stolen from him, and for this broken girl who'd somehow found her way to his door. When the crying finally stopped, Frank crept back to bed. Tomorrow, there would be decisions to make, questions to answer, realities to face. But tonight, there was just this, 2 shattered people under one roof, learning how to breathe in the same space. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Have you ever had a moment where helping someone else helped you heal? Share your story in the comments. Let me know where you are watching from. Frank woke to the smell of burning toast. For a disorienting moment, he thought he was dreaming, or that he'd somehow slipped backward through time to a Sunday morning when Sarah would inevitably set off the smoke alarm while attempting to make breakfast. But then reality crashed back. The empty bed, the silence, the weight of 3 years pressing down on his chest. Except the house wasn't silent. He bolted upright, remembering. Lily. Frank threw on a robe and rushed downstairs, his heart hammering. The living room was empty, blankets neatly folded on the couch. For one terrible second, he thought she'd run, that he'd wake to find her gone, just a damp towel and borrowed clothes left behind like evidence of a dream. Then he heard the clattering from the kitchen. Lily stood at the stove, still swimming in his oversized t-shirt, attempting to scrape blackened bread out of the toaster. She'd found the eggs, the milk, the bread. She tried to make breakfast. The kitchen looked like a small tornado had passed through. Flour on the counter, a broken eggshell in the sink, orange juice pooled on the floor. "I'm sorry," she said immediately when she saw him, her voice high with panic. "I was trying to help. I wanted to. I'm sorry, I'll clean it up, Lily." Frank crossed the kitchen, carefully avoiding the orange juice. "Lily, it's okay. You don't need to apologize. But I made a mess. I ruined your kitchen." Her eyes were wild, waiting for the blow to fall, the punishment to come. Frank's chest constricted. How many times had she been punished for simply existing? For trying to help? For making normal, childish mistakes? "Hey." He crouched down to her level, keeping his voice gentle. "You didn't ruin anything. This is what kitchens are for: cooking, making messes, burning toast. My wife burned toast at least twice a week. It's practically a family tradition." Lily blinked at him, suspicious. "You're not mad." "Why would I be mad? You were trying to do something nice." His voice cracked unexpectedly. "That's actually really sweet. Thank you." She stared at him like he was speaking another language. Then, slowly, her shoulders lowered. The panic in her eyes dimmed to uncertainty. "How about we clean this up together and then make breakfast properly?" Frank suggested. "I'll teach you my world-famous scrambled eggs." Fair warning, they're probably not actually world-famous. The corner of Lily's mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. They cleaned in comfortable silence, Frank showing her where things went, Lily absorbing every detail like she was memorizing a map for future escape. When the kitchen was spotless, they worked side by side at the stove, Frank cracking eggs, Lily stirring, both of them existing in a small pocket of normalcy that felt as fragile as spun glass. "Mr. Reid," Lily asked as they sat down to eat. "You can call me Frank. Mr. Reid makes me feel like I'm about to give a lecture on tax law." "What's tax law?" "Exactly." He smiled. "Very boring adult stuff." Lily took a bite of eggs, considering. "Frank. That was my grandpa's name. Before he died." "Yeah? What was he like?" "Kind." The word came out soft, weighted with loss. "He was the only one who was kind. After Mom died, he tried to keep us together. But then he got sick, and..." She trailed off, staring at her plate. "Us?" Frank asked gently. "You have siblings." Lily's fork froze halfway to her mouth. For a long moment, she didn't respond. "I had a little brother. Tommy. He was 6. The past tense landed like a stone in Frank's stomach. They separated us." Lily's voice had gone flat, emotionless in that way that meant the emotions were too big to show. "After Grandpa died, social services came. They put me with my uncle because he was family. They put Tommy in a foster home across town. Said it was temporary. Said we'd be together again soon." She looked up at Frank, and the grief in her eyes was ancient. "That was 2 years ago. I haven't seen him since." Frank set down his fork, his appetite gone. "Your uncle? Is he the one you were running from?" Lily's jaw clenched. She nodded once, sharp and quick. "Did he hurt you?" Another nod. Slower this time. "Lily, I need you to tell me what happened. I can't help you if I don't understand." "Yes, you can." Lily pushed her plate away, her hands balling into fists. "You can let me stay here. You can not tell anyone. That's helping." "For how long? A week? A month? Eventually someone's going to notice. I work, you should be in school." "I hate school." The vehemence in her voice startled him. "Everyone stares. The teachers all know. They all whisper. That's the foster kid. That's the one whose mom overdosed. Poor thing." She spat out the last 2 words like poison. "I don't need their pity. I don't need anyone's pity." "What about what you deserve?" Frank asked quietly. "What about safety? Education? A childhood?" Lily laughed, bitter and broken. "I stopped being a child the day my mom died, and my uncle decided I was free labor." "You want to know what happened, Frank? You really want to know?" He nodded, even though part of him wanted to cover his ears, to protect himself from the truth he could see coming. "He drank," Lily said, her voice flat. "Every day, every night. And when he drank, he got mean. At first it was just yelling. Then it was throwing things. Then it was..." She lifted her sleeve, revealing a scar that ran from her elbow to her wrist. "He pushed me into the glass coffee table. Told the ER I fell off my bike." Frank felt bile rise in his throat. "Jesus, Lily. And when I wasn't cleaning his house, or cooking his meals, or making sure he didn't choke on his own vomit, he'd tell me stories about Tommy. About how Tommy was better off without me. About how I was the reason Mom died, the reason Grandpa died, the reason everything fell apart. He said, her voice finally broke. He said if I ever tried to leave, if I ever told anyone, he'd make sure I never saw Tommy again. That he'd make sure Tommy ended up somewhere worse. But you did leave, Frank said. You ran. Because last week, he came home different. Lily's hands were shaking now, her whole body trembling with the memory. Angrier. More drunk than usual. He grabbed me by the throat, slammed me against the wall, and said he was done with me. Said I was too much trouble, ate too much food, cost too much money. He said, she swallowed hard. He said he was going to get rid of me. That no one would miss me. That no one would even look. Frank's vision blurred red. Every protective instinct he possessed roared to life. Did he? I bit him, Lily said, lifting her chin with a flash of defiance. Hard. Drew blood. And when he let go to look at his hand, I ran. I grabbed my coat, and I ran, and I didn't stop. I didn't know where to go. I didn't have anywhere to go. So I just walked. For days. Slept in doorways, in parking garages, behind dumpsters. And then it started snowing, and I thought, her voice dropped to a whisper. I thought maybe it was better. Easier. To just fall asleep in the snow and not wake up. Lily. Frank reached across the table, stopping just short of touching her hand. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Don't be sorry. She pulled her hands back, tucking them under her legs. Sorry doesn't help. Sorry doesn't change anything. You're right, Frank said. Sorry isn't enough. So here's what I'm going to do instead. I'm going to make sure you never go back there. I'm going to make sure you're safe. And I'm going to help you find Tommy. Lily's head snapped up. You can't promise that. You don't even know me. Why would you? Because someone should have done it for you a long time ago, Frank said fiercely. Because you're a child and you deserve protection. Because, he stopped, surprised by the emotion choking his words. Because my daughter would have been 10 this year. And I like to think that if she'd been scared and alone, someone would have helped her. Someone would have shown up. Tears spilled down Lily's cheeks. But what if they find me? What if he reports me missing? What if the police? Then we deal with it. Together. Frank stood up, pacing now, his mind already racing through options. First, we need to keep you safe and hidden. No school for now. I'll figure something out. I can work from home most days. We'll keep the curtains drawn, stay low profile. Second, we need information. I have a friend, David. He works with youth services. Maybe he can dig around quietly, find out where Tommy is, what your legal status actually is. You do that. Lily's voice was barely audible. Risk all that for me. Frank stopped pacing and looked at her, really looked at her. This fierce, broken, impossibly brave little girl who'd survived horrors that would have destroyed most adults. Who'd chosen a park bench in the snow over returning to abuse. Who'd somehow held on to enough hope to accept his help, even when hope seemed like the cruelest lie. Yeah, he said simply. I would. For a long moment, they just looked at each other. Two people who'd lost everything, standing in a kitchen that still smelled like burnt toast, making impossible promises in the winter light. Then Lily nodded. Okay, but if things go wrong, if they come for me, you have to let me run. You can't try to stop me. Promise me that. Lily, promise me, Frank. Please. He wanted to argue. Wanted to tell her that running wasn't the answer, that there were legal channels, proper procedures. But he'd already broken a dozen laws by not reporting her. And deep down, he understood. She'd been betrayed by every system meant to protect her. Running was the only control she had left. I promise, he said quietly. But it won't come to that. You don't know that. No, Frank admitted. I don't. But I'm choosing to believe it anyway. And maybe you could try believing it too. Just for today. Lily looked down at her hands, at the scars and bruises that told a story she'd never asked to live. Then she looked back up at him, and something in her expression had shifted. Not trust, not yet. But maybe the beginning of it. Maybe the smallest seed of possibility. Just for today, she echoed. The rest of the morning passed in careful choreography. Frank called his office and claimed a family emergency, not technically a lie. Lily explored the house like a cat in a new territory, moving from room to room, touching things lightly, as if testing their solidity. She lingered longest at the door to Emma's room, which Frank kept closed but never locked. Can I? She asked, her hand on the doorknob. Frank's first instinct was to say no. That room was sacred, untouchable. A time capsule of a life that had ended too soon. But looking at Lily's careful, hopeful expression, he found himself nodding. Yeah, you can. Lily opened the door slowly. The room was exactly as Emma had left it. Books scattered across the floor, stuffed animals arranged on the bed, crayon drawings taped to the walls. 3 years of dust and memories, preserved in amber. She liked unicorns, Lily observed, picking up a stuffed purple unicorn from the bed. Yeah, she believed in magic. Frank leaned against the doorframe, surprised that being in here didn't hurt as much as he'd expected. Said she was going to find a real unicorn someday and teach it to fly. That's dumb. But Lily was smiling. Unicorns already know how to fly. Everyone knows that. You're right. What was I thinking? Frank smiled back. She would have liked you, I think. Emma. She was fierce like you. Stubborn. Brave. I'm not brave, Lily said quietly, still holding the unicorn. Brave people don't hide. Brave people survive, Frank countered. They do whatever it takes to see another day. That's what you did, Lily. That's what you're doing. She set the unicorn down carefully, reverently. Can I sleep in here? Instead of the couch? The question punched through Frank's chest. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. This room had been a shrine for 3 years. A place he couldn't bear to change, couldn't bear to touch, couldn't bear to let go. But maybe that was exactly the problem. Maybe holding on to death so tightly meant he'd forgotten how to hold on to life. Yeah, he said, his voice rough. Yeah, you can sleep in here. Lily turned to him, and for the first time since he'd found her, she smiled. Really smiled. It transformed her entire face, chased away the shadows, made her look like the child she should have been all along. Thank you, she whispered. Frank nodded, not trusting his voice. He left her there, exploring Emma's books and toys with the gentle reverence of someone who understood that these things were precious, that they belonged to someone loved. In the living room, Frank pulled out his phone and stared at David's contact information. This was it. The moment where he either committed fully to this insane plan or did the responsible thing and called the authorities. His thumb hovered over the screen. Then he remembered Lily's terror when she said he'll kill me. He remembered the scars on her arms. He remembered 9 years of survival etched into her eyes. He called David. Frank, twice in 2 days? Should I be worried? I need a favor, Frank said without preamble. A big one. And I need you to not ask too many questions. There was a pause. How big are we talking? I need you to look into the foster system. Quietly. I need information about a child named Tommy, probably Thomas, last name unknown, approximately 8 years old now, placed in foster care in Minneapolis about 2 years ago. And I need information about his sister, Lily, same last name, 9 years old, placed with a biological uncle around the same time. Another pause, longer this time. Frank, what did you do? I found a kid in the snow, Frank said quietly. And I couldn't walk away. Can you help me or not? David sighed. This is going to bite us both in the ass. You know that, right? Probably. Give me a few days. And Frank, be careful. If this is what I think it is, you're playing with fire. I know, Frank said. But some things are worth burning for. He hung up and stood at the window, watching snow fall on his pristine suburban lawn. From upstairs, he heard Lily's footsteps, lighter now, moving through Emma's room with growing confidence. A little girl who'd been invisible for years, finally seen. A man who'd been dead for 3 years, finally breathing. 2 broken pieces that somehow, impossibly, were starting to fit together. Frank didn't know if this would end in salvation or disaster. But for the first time since Sarah and Emma died, he felt like he was living instead of just existing. And that, he thought, was worth whatever came next. Sometimes saving someone means risking everything you have left. Would you take that leap? Let us know what you'd do. 3 weeks passed like a held breath. Frank fell into a routine he hadn't known was possible. Waking to the sound of someone else in the house, making breakfast for 2, working from his home office while Lily read books from Emma's shelf or drew pictures at the kitchen table. Small, domestic moments that felt simultaneously foreign and achingly familiar. She was still skittish, still watchful. She flinched at loud noises, positioned herself near exits, kept a backpack of essentials hidden under her bed, just in case. But slowly, incrementally, she began to unfold. She laughed at stupid jokes. She argued about which cereals were acceptable breakfast foods. She fell asleep on the couch during movies and didn't wake up panicking. She started to feel like home. Frank taught her fractions using pizza slices. She taught him how to braid hair using YouTube tutorials and Emma's old dolls. They established rules. No lying, no secrets about safety, and Wednesdays were for homemade pancakes, non-negotiable. On the surface, it looked almost normal. But underneath, Frank lived with constant, gnawing fear. Every car that slowed on their street made his heart stop. Every knock on the door felt like Judgment Day. He'd become a criminal, harboring a runaway, concealing a child from authorities, lying to everyone he knew about why he was suddenly working from home. And he didn't regret a single second of it. David had been digging quietly, carefully. What he'd found made Frank's blood run cold. Lily's uncle, Robert Morrison, had reported her missing exactly once. A perfunctory call to police 3 days after she'd run, claiming his troubled niece had probably run away to find her brother. No follow-up. No search. No missing persons campaign. Like she was an inconvenience that had solved itself. Tommy was in foster care with a family in South Minneapolis, the Harrisons. According to David's sources, they were good people. Kind people. Tommy was safe, enrolled in school, reportedly adjusting well. But he was also legally tied to a system that viewed Lily as Robert Morrison's responsibility. And if Morrison wanted her back, either to maintain his state stipend or to silence her permanently, the law would drag her there. We need to get ahead of this, David had said over coffee at Frank's house, his voice low while Lily was upstairs. You can't keep her hidden forever. Eventually someone's going to notice. A neighbor. A delivery person. Hell, the kid herself might accidentally be seen. And when that happens, this all falls apart. So what do you suggest? Frank had asked, his jaw tight. We build a case. Document everything. The scars, the abuse history, get Lily's testimony on record. We petition for emergency custody, cite the uncle's neglect and violence. It's not guaranteed, but with the right lawyer. And if we lose? If they send her back? David had looked at him with something like pity. Then you did everything you could. That conversation had been 2 days ago. Frank still hadn't told Lily. How did you explain to a child that the safety you'd promised might be temporary? That the system she'd fled might still reclaim her? He was in his office, reviewing the custody petition David had helped him draft, when Lily's scream shattered the afternoon quiet. Frank bolted from his chair, taking the stairs 3 at a time. Lily. She was in Emma's room. Her room now, standing frozen at the window, her face chalk white. There's a car. A black car. It's been sitting there for 10 minutes. Just sitting there. Frank moved to the window. Sure enough, a dark sedan was parked 3 houses down, engine running, windows tinted. As he watched, the driver's side door opened. A man stepped out. Mid-40s, heavy-set, wearing a stained jacket. Even from this distance, Frank could see the anger in his movements, the aggressive purpose in his stride. That's him, Lily whispered, backing away from the window. That's my uncle. Oh God, he found me. He found me. Panic sliced through Frank's chest. How? How could he possibly? But even as he asked, he knew. 3 weeks of groceries delivered to the house. 3 weeks of lights on at unusual hours. 3 weeks of a single man suddenly behaving like he had a family. In a neighborhood where everyone knew everyone's business, someone had noticed. Someone had talked. Go to your room, Frank said, his voice deadly calm. Lock the door. Get your bag. If anything happens, if you hear anything wrong, you go out the window onto the garage roof and you run. You understand me? You run and you don't look back. Frank. Promise me, Lily. Tears streamed down her face. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I should never have stayed. I should never have. This is not your fault. Frank gripped her shoulders, forcing her to look at him. None of this is your fault. Now go. Lock the door. I'll handle this. Lily hesitated for one more second, then fled to her room. Frank heard the lock click just as the doorbell rang. He walked downstairs slowly, every step deliberate. His hands were shaking, adrenaline flooding his system. He'd never been a violent man. Sarah used to tease him about rescuing spiders instead of killing them. But looking through the peephole at Robert Morrison's bloated, angry face, Frank felt something primal awaken. This man had terrorized a child, had beaten her, starved her, threatened her life. And now he'd come to take her back. Over Frank's dead body. He opened the door, but kept his body blocking the entrance. Can I help you? Morrison's eyes were bloodshot, his breath reeking of cheap whiskey, even from 3 feet away. Yeah, you can help me by giving me back what's mine. I know she's here. I know you've been hiding her. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't play games with me. Morrison stepped closer, aggressive. Little bitch who bit me and ran away. Been asking around, and wouldn't you know it, some nosy neighbor mentioned seeing a kid in your window. A kid that looks an awful lot like my niece. So I'll ask you again, where is she? Frank's jaw clenched. Even if I knew where this child was, why would I give her to someone who shows up drunk, making threats? Because she's my responsibility. Because the state pays me to take care of her. And because if you don't hand her over right now, I'm calling the cops and telling them you kidnapped her. Please do. Frank pulled out his own phone. While you're at it, I'll tell them about the scars on her arms. The bruises. The death threats. I'm sure they'd be very interested in hearing about how you take care of children. Morrison's face went purple. You self-righteous son of a... He lunged forward, trying to push past Frank into the house. Frank had never thrown a punch in his life. But when Morrison's hand reached for the doorframe, when he tried to force his way toward Lily, something inside Frank snapped. He shoved Morrison backward with both hands. Hard. The older man stumbled off the porch, barely catching himself on the railing. You don't get to come into my home, Frank said, his voice shaking with fury. You don't get to terrorize that little girl anymore. She's not yours. She never was. Morrison's eyes narrowed to slits. You know what you just did? That's assault. I got witnesses. He gestured vaguely at the street. You just assaulted me while I was trying to retrieve my legal dependent. You're done, pal. You're finished. Then call the police, Frank challenged. Go ahead. Call them. Let's see what they have to say when they hear the full story. For a long moment, they stared at each other. Morrison's hand twitched toward his pocket, toward his phone, then stopped. Because they both knew the truth. The moment the police got involved, the moment there was an investigation, Morrison's abuse would come to light. The state stipends would stop. The questions would start. He couldn't afford the scrutiny any more than Frank could. This isn't over, Morrison spat. That kid is mine. The law says so. In one way or another, I'm getting her back. Maybe not today. Maybe not tomorrow. But soon. And when I do, he smiled, cruel and cold. She's gonna wish she froze to death in that park. He turned and stalked back to his car, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows. The engine revved, and he peeled away, leaving tire marks on the pristine suburban street. Frank stood on the porch, his whole body shaking, until the car disappeared around the corner. Then his legs gave out. He sat down hard on the front steps, his head in his hands, trying to remember how to breathe. Frank. He looked up. Lily stood in the doorway, her face streaked with tears, that backpack slung over her shoulder. I have to go, she said, her voice breaking. I have to leave. If I stay, he'll hurt you. He'll destroy your life. I can't. I won't let that happen. Lily, you've done enough. You've been so kind. But this is my mess, my problem. I'll figure something out. I always do. She started to move past him, down the steps, but Frank caught her hand. Gently, carefully. No, he said. Frank, please. No, he repeated, stronger this time. He stood up, keeping her hand in his, looking down at this fierce, broken little girl who'd been fighting alone for so long. You're not running anymore. We're not running anymore. But he'll come back. He'll call the police, or then we'll be ready. Frank pulled out his phone, his hands steadier now, his resolve crystallizing into something unbreakable. David, he said when his friend answered. We're out of time. I need that emergency custody petition filed today. Now. And I need the best child welfare lawyer you know. Frank, what happened? The uncle showed up. He knows she's here. And I'm not giving her back. I don't care what it takes. I don't care what it costs. We're doing this the right way, the legal way, but we're doing it now. I'll make some calls, David said immediately. Sit tight. Don't let anyone in that house until I get there with a lawyer. Frank hung up and turned back to Lily. Take off that backpack. You're not going anywhere. But, no buts. I made you a promise, remember? I said I'd keep you safe. I said I'd help you find Tommy. I meant it. He crouched down to her level. I know you're scared. I'm scared too. But we're not facing this alone anymore. We have help. We have a plan. And most importantly, we have something your uncle never counted on. What's that? Lily whispered. We have the truth. And the truth is that you deserve better. You deserve safety, love, a home. Not because you're perfect or easy or convenient, but because you're a child. Because you matter. Because, his voice cracked. Because somewhere along the way, you became family to me. And I protect my family. Lily stared at him, tears spilling down her cheeks. Then, slowly, she let the backpack slide off her shoulders. It hit the ground with a soft thump. Okay, she breathed. Okay. Frank pulled her into a hug, and she collapsed against him, sobbing into his chest. He held her while she cried, while she finally let herself believe that someone was going to fight for her, that she wasn't alone anymore. We're going to win this, he murmured into her hair. I don't know how yet, but we're going to win. Upstairs, through Emma's window, the winter sun broke through the clouds, painting the room in gold. And for the first time in 3 years, Frank Reid felt something he'd thought was dead forever. Hope. The next 72 hours moved with the chaotic precision of a controlled avalanche. David arrived within the hour with Melissa Cardona, a family law attorney with a reputation for being both brilliant and ruthless. She sat at Frank's dining room table, her silver hair pulled back in a severe bun, her eyes sharp as she listened to Lily's story. Every word, every scar, every nightmare. Lily's voice shook as she spoke, but she didn't stop. She told Melissa about the beatings, the starvation, the night her uncle had wrapped his hands around her throat. She showed the scars. She recounted the threats. And when she finished, Melissa reached across the table and squeezed her hand. You're very brave, Melissa said quietly. And I'm going to make sure you never have to go back there. Do you understand? That man will never touch you again. Lily nodded, her eyes red but dry. She'd cried herself out. Now there was only determination. Melissa turned to Frank. This is going to get messy. Morrison has legal custody, which means the burden of proof is on us. We need to demonstrate not just that he's unfit, but that you're a better option. That means home studies, background checks, character witnesses. Your life is about to be turned inside out. I don't care, Frank said immediately. Whatever it takes. Good. Because we're also going to petition for information about Tommy's placement. If we can reunite the siblings, if we can show that separation has caused Lily demonstrable harm, it strengthens our case. But it's a long shot. I want to see him, Lily said suddenly. I want to see Tommy. Please. It's been 2 years. I need to know he's okay. Melissa and David exchanged a look. That's complicated, David said carefully. The Harrisons would have to agree. And if they don't know about the abuse situation with your uncle, if they think you're just a runaway, then we tell them the truth, Frank interrupted. We lay it all out. If they're good people like you said, they'll understand. They'll want what's best for both kids. And if they don't, Melissa challenged. If they've bonded with Tommy? If they're considering adoption? You could be opening a legal nightmare. Frank looked at Lily, at the desperate hope in her eyes, and made his choice. It's worth the risk. She deserves to see her brother. David made the call that afternoon. The conversation was tense, careful, but the Harrisons agreed to a meeting. Neutral location. Supervised. Just 1 hour. They want to meet you first, David told Frank after he hung up. They want to understand the situation before they bring Tommy into it. Tomorrow, 2 p.m., at their attorney's office. That night, Frank couldn't sleep. He stood in the doorway of Lily's room, Emma's room, watching her sleep curled around the purple unicorn, and felt the weight of responsibility settle over him like a mantle. If he failed her, if the system took her back to Morrison, he'd never forgive himself. Around midnight, Lily's voice drifted through the darkness. You're thinking too loud. Frank smiled despite himself. Sorry, didn't mean to wake you. You didn't. I wasn't really sleeping. She sat up, the unicorn clutched in her lap. Frank, what if they don't like me? The Harrisons. What if they think I'm trouble? What if they don't want Tommy to see me? Then they're idiots, Frank said, moving to sit on the edge of the bed. But I don't think they will be. I think they'll see what I see. A smart, brave, incredible kid who survived things that would break most adults. What if Tommy doesn't remember me? What if he's happy there and I just mess everything up? Frank reached out and gently brushed hair from her face. Love doesn't forget, Lily. You told me that, remember? Your mom said it lives in your heart forever. Tommy hasn't forgotten you. I'd bet everything I have on that. Lily was quiet for a long moment. Then, if this works, if we win, would you want to keep me? Like, really keep me? Or would you want me to go live with Tommy and the Harrisons? The question pierced straight through Frank's heart. In 3 weeks, this child had become essential. The thought of losing her felt like losing Sarah and Emma all over again. I want whatever makes you happiest, he said carefully. If you want to be with Tommy, I'd understand. I'd help make that happen. But if you wanted to stay here, his voice caught. I'd be honored. I'd be so honored, Lily. You've already completed something in this house. In me. You've made it feel like a home again. Tears slipped down Lily's cheeks. I want both. I want you and I want Tommy. Is that selfish? No, sweetheart. That's not selfish. That's human. Frank pulled her into a hug. And maybe, just maybe, we can figure out a way to make it work. But let's take it one step at a time, okay? First, we meet the Harrisons. Then we deal with Morrison. Then we figure out the rest. Together? Lily whispered against his shoulder. Together, Frank promised. The Harrisons' attorney's office was sterile and intimidating, all glass and chrome and uncomfortable modern furniture. Frank sat in the conference room with Melissa on one side and Lily on the other, his hand covering hers under the table as they waited. When the door opened, Frank's first thought was that the Harrisons looked kind. Andrea Harrison was in her early 40s, with warm brown eyes and a gentle smile. Her husband James was tall and soft-spoken, with the careful movements of someone used to dealing with fragile things. Their attorney, a severe man named Patterson, sat between them like a guard dog. Thank you for meeting with us, Melissa began. I know this situation is unusual. It's unconscionable, Patterson interrupted. You're harboring a child who's legally in the custody of her biological uncle. You've made no effort to contact proper authorities. And now you want access to her brother? I advised my clients against this meeting. Then I'm glad they didn't listen, Frank said quietly. Because this isn't about legal technicalities. This is about two children who were torn apart by a system that failed them. Andrea Harrison leaned forward. We know about the uncle. David explained the situation. She glanced at her husband, who nodded encouragingly. We've suspected something was wrong for a while. Tommy has nightmares. He wakes up crying for his sister. He's terrified of men with loud voices. He flinches at sudden movements. That's trauma, James added, his voice tight. We've had him in therapy. It's helping, but there's something he's not telling us. Something he's afraid to say. Lily spoke up, her voice small but steady. He's afraid of getting you in trouble. Of saying the wrong thing and being moved again. He's learned that if he's good and quiet and doesn't make waves, maybe they'll let him stay. Andrea's eyes filled with tears. How do you know that? Because that's how I survived too. Until I couldn't anymore. The room fell silent. Patterson cleared his throat. Mrs. Harrison, Mr. Harrison, we should discuss this privately. No. Andrea's voice was firm. I want to hear this. All of it. So Lily told her story again. The abuse. The threats. The escape. The 3 weeks with Frank. And as she spoke, Andrea Harrison cried openly, and James's jaw clenched tighter and tighter. When Lily finished, Andrea turned to Frank. You saved her life. She saved mine, Frank said simply. I lost my family 3 years ago. I was just existing, going through the motions. Lily gave me a reason to be alive again. She gave me purpose. And what happens now? James asked. If we let her see Tommy, if we open this door, where does it lead? Melissa stepped in. We're filing for emergency custody of Lily, citing abuse and neglect. We're also requesting a review of the original placement decision that separated the siblings. Our goal is to keep Lily safe and, if possible, reunite her with her brother. In whose custody? Patterson demanded. Mr. Reid is a single man with no parenting experience beyond 3 weeks of illegal harboring. My clients are established foster parents with excellent references and 2 years of history with the boy. I'm not trying to take Tommy from them, Frank said quickly, looking directly at the Harrisons. I'm not trying to tear apart another family. I just want Lily to be safe. And I want her to have a relationship with her brother. However that looks, whatever arrangement works best for both kids, that's what I want. Andrea and James looked at each other, having one of those silent conversations that only long-married couples can manage. Finally, Andrea spoke. We'd like to bring Tommy here. We'd like him to see his sister. And then, she took a deep breath. Then we'd like to talk about what comes next. All of us. Together. Patterson started to object, but James held up a hand. This isn't about legal strategy, Patterson. This is about doing what's right for these kids. Make the call. 20 minutes later, Tommy walked through the conference room door. He was small for 8 years old, with dark hair like Lily's and the same watchful, careful eyes. He wore a dinosaur t-shirt and light-up sneakers, looking like any ordinary kid except for the way he held himself. Contained, cautious, ready to disappear at the first sign of danger. Then he saw Lily. Lily. His voice was barely a whisper, like he was afraid speaking her name might make her vanish. Tommy. Lily stood up, her whole body trembling. Tommy, it's me. It's really me. For a frozen second, neither of them moved. Then Tommy ran, not to Lily, but away from the adults, positioning himself with his back to the wall. A defensive position. A survivor's instinct. Lily understood. She didn't rush him, didn't overwhelm him. She just stayed where she was, her hands visible, her voice soft. I'm sorry I left you, she said, tears streaming down her face. I'm so sorry, Tommy. I tried to find you. I tried so hard. But they wouldn't tell me where you were, and Uncle Rob said, her voice broke. I should have tried harder. I should have. You're alive. Tommy's voice was awed, disbelieving. I thought you were dead. He said, Uncle Rob came to see me 6 months ago. He said you ran away and probably froze somewhere. He said you didn't want me anymore. Lily made a sound like a wounded animal. No, Tommy, that's not true. I never stopped wanting you. I never stopped loving you. I was just trying to survive. I was trying to find a way to come back for you. Tommy looked at the adults warily, at Andrea and James, who were crying quietly, at Frank, who was trying to hold himself together, at the lawyers, who for once looked like human beings instead of legal adversaries. Is it safe? Tommy asked Lily. To come out? Are they going to separate us again? I don't know, Lily said honestly. But I'm going to fight. And I'm not alone anymore. I have someone who's fighting for me. She looked at Frank. For us. Tommy followed her gaze. Who are you? Frank crouched down, putting himself at Tommy's eye level. My name is Frank. I found your sister in the snow 3 weeks ago. She was very brave, and very strong, and very scared. She told me about you. She told me how much she missed you. And I promised her I'd help her find you. Why? Tommy asked, that single word containing a universe of trauma and distrust. Because a long time ago, I had a little girl too. And I lost her. And I know. Frank's voice cracked. I know what it's like to miss someone so much it feels like you can't breathe. I know what it's like to feel alone in a world that's too big and too scary. And I thought maybe, if I could help your sister, if I could help you, it might mean something. It might matter. Tommy studied him with those two old eyes. Then he looked at Andrea and James. Are they going to make her go away again? No, Andrea said firmly. Not if we have anything to say about it. We want to help, James added. All of us. Together. If you'll let us. Tommy looked back at Lily. At his sister, who'd survived hell to find him. Who'd run into the snow rather than give up hope. Who was standing there with her arms slightly open, waiting, always waiting for him to feel safe enough to come home. He took one step forward. Then another. Then he was running, crashing into Lily's arms, both of them collapsing to the floor in a tangle of sobs and laughter and whispered promises. I missed you. Tommy cried into her shoulder. I missed you so much. I'm here now, Lily whispered back, holding him like she'd never let go. I'm here, and I'm not leaving. Never again. Frank watched them, these two children who'd been broken by a system meant to protect them, putting each other back together through sheer force of love. And he felt Sarah's presence beside him, felt Emma's hand slip into his, felt the weight of grief lift just enough to let the light in. This, he thought, this is why we keep going. This is why we fight. This is why we don't give up. Andrea Harrison moved to stand beside him, tissue in hand, mascara running down her cheeks. We need to figure this out, she said quietly. The custody situation. The legalities. But Mr. Reid, Frank, I want you to know that we're not the enemy here. We love Tommy. We want what's best for him. And what's best for him is having his sister in his life. I agree, Frank said. And I want what's best for Lily. Which means having her brother in her life. So maybe, Andrea said slowly, maybe the question isn't who gets custody. Maybe the question is how we build something better. Something that keeps these kids together, keeps them safe, gives them the family they deserve. James joined them. We've been considering adoption. For Tommy. We love him. He's ours, in every way that matters except legally. But if we do that, if we make it permanent, Lily should be part of that conversation. Part of that family. Frank looked at them. These strangers who were offering to share their hearts with his broken little girl. Are you saying? I'm saying that maybe Tommy needs 2 homes, Andrea said. The Harrisons and the Reids. Joint custody. Shared holidays. Siblings who actually get to be siblings. Is that crazy? It's unconventional, Melissa interjected, but she was smiling. but not impossible. If all parties agree, if we can demonstrate to the court that this arrangement serves the children's best interests, we could petition for a shared custody agreement. It would mean coordination, compromise, flexibility. It would mean family, Frank said, looking at Lily and Tommy still clinging to each other on the floor. Real family. The kind you choose. Yes, James said firmly. Exactly that. Patterson started to speak, but Andrea cut him off. We're doing this, Patterson. Make it work. The attorney sighed, but he was already pulling out his tablet. I'll draft a proposal, but we still have the uncle to deal with. Morrison has legal custody of Lily, and he's not going to give it up without a fight. Then we fight, Frank said. All of us. Together. The custody hearing 3 weeks later was brutal. Morrison showed up with a public defender and a rehearsed story about a troubled niece who'd run away without cause. He claimed Frank had manipulated her, filled her head with lies, turned her against her loving family. But Melissa Cardona was a force of nature. She presented medical records documenting Lily's scars. She brought in Tommy's therapist, who testified about the boy's nightmares and trauma responses. She had David testify about Morrison's history of alcohol abuse and the suspicious circumstances of Lily's disappearance. And then she put Lily on the stand. Frank wanted to spare her that. Wanted to protect her from having to relive her trauma in front of strangers. But Lily insisted. I need to tell them, she'd said the night before, her jaw set with determination. I need them to hear it from me. No more hiding. No more running. So Lily sat in the witness box, small and brave in a blue dress Andrea had bought her, and told her truth. Every word clear. Every detail unflinching. She looked directly at Morrison as she spoke, refusing to be intimidated. When she finished, the judge, a stern woman named Rivera, leaned forward. Miss Morrison, one last question. If I were to grant your uncle continued custody, with court-ordered therapy and monitoring, would you feel safe returning to his home? Lily didn't hesitate. No, Your Honor. I'd run again. And next time, I might not be lucky enough to survive. The courtroom fell silent. Morrison's lawyer tried to object, but Judge Rivera silenced him with a look. Mr. Morrison, the judge said, turning her attention to Lily's uncle. In 30 years on this bench, I've seen a lot of people claim to love children while treating them like property. You didn't report your niece missing for 3 days. You made no effort to search for her. You showed up to this hearing smelling of alcohol and barely coherent. You are demonstrably unfit to parent a goldfish, let alone a traumatized 9-year-old girl. Morrison started to protest, but Rivera wasn't finished. I'm terminating your custody effective immediately. Furthermore, I'm ordering a full investigation into your treatment of Miss Morrison during the time she was in your care. If evidence of criminal abuse is found, charges will be filed. Do you understand? Morrison's face went purple with rage, but he nodded. Rivera turned to Frank and the Harrisons. Now, as for this unconventional custody arrangement you're proposing, normally, I'd be skeptical, but I've reviewed the home studies. I've read the testimonials from both households. I've seen how these children light up when they talk about their future with you. She paused, looking directly at Lily and Tommy, who sat together in the front row, holding hands. These children have been failed by every system meant to protect them. They've survived abuse, neglect, and forced separation. And now they've found people willing to fight for them. People willing to build bridges instead of walls. Judge Rivera stamped her paperwork with finality. I'm granting joint legal custody of Lily Morrison to Frank Reid and Andrea and James Harrison, with primary physical custody alternating weekly. I'm also expediting adoption proceedings for both children, should all parties wish to proceed. And I'm ordering continued therapy for both minors to address their trauma. She looked up, her expression softening for the first time. You 4 adults are undertaking something difficult, something most people wouldn't attempt. But if you can make it work, if you can give these children the stability and love they deserve, you'll be doing something remarkable. The gavel came down. We're adjourned. For a moment, no one moved. Then Lily and Tommy ran to their new family, to Frank and Andrea and James, and they all collapsed together in a mess of tears and laughter and overwhelming relief. We did it, Lily whispered, looking up at Frank. We really did it. You did it, Frank corrected, brushing tears from his eyes. You were so brave up there. So strong. I learned from the best, Lily said, squeezing his hand. Andrea pulled them all into a group hug, and for the first time in years, Frank felt complete. Not the same as before. He'd never get Sarah and Emma back. But whole in a different way. Healed in a way he hadn't thought possible. 6 months later, on a warm June evening, both families gathered in the Reids' backyard for a celebration. Tommy's 9th birthday and Lily's official adoption day. They decided to combine the celebrations because, as Lily put it, we've been separated enough. From now on, we do everything together. The yard was full of people, David and Melissa, neighbors, Tommy's friends from school, Lily's new classmates. Frank stood at the grill, flipping burgers while Andrea supervised the kids' water balloon fight, and James set up the birthday cake. "Never thought I'd see you like this," David said, appearing at Frank's elbow with 2 beers. "Happy?" Frank smiled, watching Lily and Tommy chase each other through the sprinkler, their laughter echoing through the summer air. "Neither did I. For a long time, I thought happiness was something that happened to other people, that I'd used up my quota. And now I know that love doesn't run out. It just changes shape." He accepted the beer, raising it in a toast. "To second chances." "To second chances," David echoed. Later, after the cake and presents, after the guests had left and Tommy had fallen asleep in the hammock, Lily found Frank on the back porch. She climbed into the chair beside him, tucking herself under his arm like she belonged there. "Frank," she said quietly, "can I ask you something? Anything. Do you think Emma would have liked me?" Frank looked down at her, this fierce, brave, beautiful girl who'd stumbled into his life and changed everything. "I think Emma would have loved you. I think she probably sent you to me, in her own way, to remind me how to live again." Lily smiled. "I like that idea." She was quiet for a moment, then, "I'm glad I didn't die in the snow. I'm glad you found me." "Me too, sweetheart. Me too." They sat together in comfortable silence, watching fireflies dance in the growing darkness. Inside the house, Andrea and James were cleaning up, their voices mixing with soft music from the radio. Tommy's gentle snores drifted from the hammock. A family. Complicated, unconventional, patched together from broken pieces. But real. Solid. Built on truth and trust, and the radical decision to show up for each other, no matter what. Lily yawned, snuggling closer. "Hey, Frank." "Yeah. Thank you. For everything. For saving me. For fighting for me. For," her voice caught, "for being my dad." Frank's heart clenched, tears stinging his eyes. They'd been dancing around that word for months, neither quite brave enough to say it. But hearing it now, spoken with such casual certainty, felt like the final piece clicking into place. "Thank you for being my daughter," he whispered, kissing the top of her head. "I love you, Lily. I love you too." She paused. "Can we turn Emma's pictures face up now? I think she'd want to see how happy we are." Frank thought about it, about the fear that had kept him frozen for so long, about the belief that honoring the dead meant holding on to grief. But Lily was right. Emma wouldn't want him sad. She'd want him living. "Yeah," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Yeah, I think it's time." They went inside together, Lily's small hand in his, and began turning picture frames face up. Sarah's brilliant smile. Emma's gap-toothed grin. Memories that no longer hurt quite so much, because they were balanced now with new joy, new love, new hope. Andrea and James joined them, and together, this strange, beautiful, chosen family, they filled the house with light. Outside, the snow from that December night felt like a lifetime ago, but its lessons remained, that sometimes salvation comes from the last place you expect, that broken people can heal each other, that love, real love, is always worth fighting for, and that sometimes, the people we rescue are really rescuing us. Family isn't always about blood. Sometimes it's about who shows up when the snow falls. Who's been your chosen family? Tell us your story below. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.